sometimes we think we need to just replicate what the more senior advisors are doing in the firm or in the industry at large. And so we sometimes mute part of ourselves to go try to be this buttoned up version that we think we're supposed to be. Welcome back to this episode of The Blueprint, an FPA NexGen Podcast. Today, Alison and I talk to Seth Streeter, co-founder and chief impact officer for Mission Wealth. In this episode, we dive into helping clients or guiding clients to find more fulfillment through the 12 dimensions of wealth, how daring to be yourself can lead to true success, and finding or creating momentum and drive from within. Let's take it away.
Hello and welcome back to the Blueprint and FPA NexGen Podcast. Today we're joined by a guest that I'm very excited about, Seth Streeter. Seth, lovely to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Allie and Mike, it's great to be here with you. I'm going to channel my younger self today, so I'm looking forward to it.
For those that don't know you, why don't you give a quick little background on how you got into financial planning and how you became the Chief Impact Officer and co-founder of Mission Wealth?
The truth is, I had no idea what I was going to do for a career when I was a senior in college, and I worked in student government at UC Santa Barbara, and I went to the Career Counseling Center, which was one of the departments I oversaw as a student representative, and I said, what am I going to do with my career? I want to be my own boss. My parents want me to get, some type of benefits and, steady compensation. This was in the 90s where, there was some job shortages. And so they said, why don't you try out financial services? And so I said, what's that? And they told me about financial services. And in fact, a company was coming to the university for on-campus interviews. And so I literally borrowed someone's dress shirt. It was too short for me. And I showed up for these job interviews. And it's kind of a funny story, but long story short, I got the job. And so I started working a week after graduating from UC Santa Barbara in Beverly Hills. I thought I had arrived. And then I realized it wasn't as glamorous of a position back in the day. There was 50 of us hired per class, and they told us that probably 2 or 3 of us would exist 12 months later. So it was a lot of attrition. They essentially said, you have to go find your own clients. You have to learn this industry on your own. You have to get your licenses on your own and learn how to market for yourself. And so I tried everything. Tried seminars, tried calling, we did door to door. This is how naive I was. My first DBA that I came up with was I wanted to be a college planning expert. So I called it College Planning Associates, CPAs. And I didn't understand why people kept calling me for tax advice. I'm like, I'm a college planning associate. So a lot of learning ground. But eventually, after 7 years there, I realized that there's kind of conflicts of interest in the industry at the time, a lot of transactional approaches. And myself and a coworker, a colleague of mine, both had this vision for building something differently. So that was Brad Stark, my co-founder. And after 7-8 years, we decided to start our own vision of how we thought clients should be served. And that was really the foundation for Mission Wealth, which was all about financial planning and staying independent and objective and having a meaningful service model. So that's how it all got started.
I'm very proud to work at Mission Wealth, and I'm so happy that you and Brad decided to go off and start your own firm. And one of the questions I had for you is, when you look back at the decision making that you were doing at that point in time, how were you evaluating whether or not going and starting your own firm was the answer, or going and trying to find that firm was the answer? And how did you develop the internal strength to go out and start something that didn't quite exist yet?
Well, initially our thought was, let's join a more aligned firm. So we actually moved from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara, where we both had gone to college. And we were both 2 of the youngest CFPs in the state of California at the time. So Brad Stark and I really believed in that education. So we got it, I was in my mid-20s. And so we interviewed all the CFPs in Santa Barbara at the time. I think there were 6. So we interviewed the 6 CFPs, and we were open to kind of having them court us and say this would be a great partnership. And each of them that we met, they were nice people, but they were doing more of what we were coming from, which was kind of selling products and not doing a lot of planning. And their service model was, hey, yeah, I get together with clients once a year and we talk about the markets and have a nice steak dinner. And that's how I serve them. And they can always call me if they have questions. And so, we always believe, no, our job is to be proactive. We can't expect the client to know if they should do a Roth conversion or not, or if they're an AMT. So we need to proactively reach out to clients about these planning, opportunities. And so after interviewing the folks that were there in town, we said, gosh, we want to live in Santa Barbara. We don't like any of these firms to go to. Why don't we start our own firm? And the vision was initially really small. It was Stark and Streeter Financial. There's two of us in a tiny one-room office without a window above a McDonald's. It was not glamorous. And after doing that for a while, we had some success getting some clients, but we thought, man, we're spending too much time marketing, not enough time planning and advising clients, which is what we really love to do. And so the big idea then was how could we get partnered with another aligned firm that had those kind of ideal fit clients that we could offer planning services to. So we brainstormed a list, our top 10 list. It was accounting firms and law firms mostly. And then we approached them and we ended up getting our number one choice on the list, the largest accounting firm in Santa Barbara, to agree to allow us to build a wealth management firm inside their CPA firm. So it wasn't like we set out to start our own firm, but there really wasn't a lot of other alternatives. And then we started on our own, and that was just like a two-person, firm. And we thought we want to be bigger than this. We don't want to spend all of our time marketing. How can we get kind of the strategic alignment? And that's how we got Mission Wealth started, was inside an accounting firm.
And walk us through some of the challenges of linking to a CPA firm. Was it a brother sister type of establishment? Walk us through the challenges and how you made it happen.
Oh, yeah. Well, we learned a lot. We started off by saying we would like to be your aligned planning firm, and we're willing to demonstrate the value we can add to your clients. We will work without any signed contract for 6 to 12 months to demonstrate the value. So we actually housed ourselves inside the accounting firm in a server room, another windowless room. I don't know what it was for us in the early days, just no windows. And we, offered to do planning for their clients that then built trust with the CPAs, that then we decided to build a joint LLC together where Brad and I owned half and the accounting firm owned half. So the new co was 50-50 percentage owned. And that was really exciting to feel like, man, now we're partnered inside this large 55-year-old CPA firm at the time. I think they had about 60 employees. The great part was that we had access to clients. The challenges were learning how CPAs think so differently than CFP financial advisors. And this was also a third generation accounting firm. So they didn't have the same kind of entrepreneurial appetite that we had. They were more focused on doing great work for their clients. Net income was their focus. They weren't thinking about like, how do I invest in growing this for tomorrow? So we had to learn how to think and speak like a CPA for 7-8 years. And after that period of time, we thought, we had a lot of joint clients with them. We had a lot of good friends in their firm, but we thought it would be better if we just could kind of get our autonomy back. And so we literally bought out the CPA firm and moved to the building next door. And that's when Mission Wealth essentially transferred to be only advisor owned.
Thinking about how you've been able to develop your financial planning philosophy and how we are proactive planners, but a strength that you have in particular is your dimensions of wealth. I'd like to go a little bit further into how you develop the dimensions of wealth, and for those that don't know, go into what the dimensions of wealth are.
Well, as advisors, we get to learn who we are as we work with clients. And so that's one of the pieces of advice I would give to my younger self as a newer advisor is sometimes we think we need to just replicate what the more senior advisors are doing in the firm or in the industry at large. And so we sometimes mute part of ourselves to go try to be this buttoned up version that we think we're supposed to be. And I did that. And, money was a serious topic. So I always tried to act older than I was. This is, of course, before I had the advantage of losing my hair, because then people just know you're older. So I was, focused on trying to play the role, and I was, able to do the planning. But what happened is first it was kind of my own personal journey, and then it became an awareness to clients' journeys where I went through a really tough period of time. I had a really tough 2-year period of time where I went through a tough divorce. I had health issues. We had the financial crisis. So I kind of everything hit me at once. And my kind of definition of success had to get rewritten because what I was striving for before was more that external achievement got kind of ripped apart. So I lost half of my net worth in the divorce, and then I lost half of my half in the financial crisis. So I'm like, okay, Seth, you better rewire And in doing my own kind of personal growth journey, where I, went to retreats, I read all the books, podcasts, really dove into my own values work, I realized that, gosh, wealth isn't just about the money. I had been so focused on achievement and not just money, but like external goals. I did Ironmans and, always wanted to accomplish more. And I started to realize that wealth is about our relationships. It's about our physical health. It's about the impact that we're having to others or in the community at large. It's about how much fun we have. It's about our emotional well-being. It's about our intellectual growth. It's about connection to a sense of a spiritual framework beyond ourselves. So I had these 12 dimensions. And as I started to reflect on that for myself, I started to see it in clients. I had clients that had $10 million beautiful homes, and they really weren't that fulfilled in their lives. And I started to do more service trips with my kids. So I took my kids on service trips to, Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico. And we worked with families that literally had almost nothing from a material sense. And yet they were actually pretty content in their lives. So I thought, okay, what is this correlation between, income and wealth and happiness? And that's when I started to broaden that definition and started to say, how can we help clients not just have greater financial abundance, but greater fulfillment across all these 12 dimensions?
Yeah, in other words, you're helping clients define what their enough is.
And in order to do that, I had to really shift my own identity as an advisor. Something I think about now is that, I used to say, what do you do? I'd say, oh, I'm an investment advisor in the early days. I'm a financial planner. I do retirement projections. And in order to be in the business of helping people find fulfillment, I had to expand my identity to say, I help clients transform. I help clients live their best lives. I help people find fulfillment across 12 dimensions of wealth. And so rather than being like a brick layer of a service, like if you think about a wall of bricks and it's like financial planning, it's investment management, it's tax planning. No, I'm helping to use those bricks to create a cathedral of a client's ideal lives. Like, how can I help them live their ideal life? And so as I expanded my own definition of what my why was, I was able to serve clients in a far more expanded and deeper way, which actually then translated into much greater success. We started landing much larger clients. We started having much higher conversion rates. We started to get more referrals. I started to love what I was doing even more, even though I loved it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm on fire right now. And that turned into a lot of beautiful things, turned into TED Talks and leading retreats around the world. And so I would just say that the lesson I learned there is dare to be fully yourself. Like, be in the fullest expression of you as an advisor, and you will attract aligned clients and you will love the work that you do so much more.
Can you tell us more about the 12 dimensions of wealth?
Yeah. So the 12 dimensions of wealth, again, is this framework, but we will help clients kind of take an assessment across their lives and see where, if it's a wheel, where is their wheel a little bit bumpy? Where do they currently feel they have abundance, and where do they currently feel they're deficient and they want to grow in? We actually have a free assessment we can post on the show notes to allow anyone to go through and take the 12 dimension assessment, which is helpful at any age to kind of reflect on, okay, where do I need to put more attention? You think about this framework when we were in COVID. A lot of people, of course, were scared because maybe their jobs had shifted. They were concerned about health. So those two dimensions, the career dimension and the health dimension, were more in jeopardy. But these other dimensions of life, right? They had more time for creativity. Maybe they had more time to start drawing or doing creative writing. They had more time to pick up a guitar and learn to play. They had more time socially to be with their close friends and family. Maybe they had more time to be healthy, to walk outside and be in nature more, and less time commuting and in an office. So when we looked at a client's life across the 12 dimensions, in many ways they became wealthier, even though some ways maybe they didn't feel that way. So it's just a broader framework. And then we do inspired talks where we bring in experts across the 12 dimensions to share ways that clients can grow in these different dimensions. So we have, my friend Dan Buettner with the Blue Zones, who talks about longevity across the world. And then we do planning conversations with clients. If you were to live 10 extra years beyond what you thought, instead of passing at 85, maybe you lived to 95 or 100, what would you do with those bonus years of your life? And then how can we tie that into the planning we do with them? When we have conversations with clients about, where you live, instead of just asking the two-dimensional questions of, okay, what's your home worth? When did you buy it? Are there any pending improvements? What's your outstanding mortgage? Those are two-dimensional questions. We could ask, do you feel a sense of place in your home? Do you love where you live? Do you love your neighbors? Do you need to, do some decluttering? Do you need to bring in more plants or more light or maybe get a smaller cabin in the woods? So when you start to talk to clients about fulfillment across these dimensions, not just the numbers of the dimensions, that's when the conversation really becomes exponentially tighter and it starts to help you separate from the herd of other advisors who only talk about the numbers.
And when you think about younger planners that are in the weeds on the technical side of financial planning, they're studying for their CFP, they're 65, they're getting educated, they're not getting too much education on how do I guide clients through the dimensions other than financial wealth. How do you recommend developing the skill set of being able to help construct the cathedral or help guide them through how do I become wealthy in these other areas that I haven't been able to focus on?
I think that it starts with that personal identification of what is your role. So if step one is, okay, what is my role? Do I want to serve the clients, have their best ideal lives, or do I want to simply confirm that they're not going to run out of money? Is my job to make sure they don't run out of money and to optimize their portfolio and optimize their tax strategy? If so, that's fine. And that's a needed service for now. My belief is that with AI, it's going to be much less and less needed as the years go forward. Allie's heard me talk about, Brian Portnoy has this great framing, which is there's two roles we have as an advisor, the mechanic and the guide. The mechanic are all the technical skills that we need to learn how to use Holistoplan and Money Guide Pro and how to build, construct a portfolio and do tax planning. Those are very important. However, digital tools and AI is starting to offer more and more and more of those mechanic skills available to clients, knowing tax codes across every state in real time. So we need to be able to shift over and provide the guide skills. And the guide skills are learning how to help clients navigate transitions. They maybe had a business and they sold it. They went through a divorce. They're retiring. They've lost a parent. These big life events are when the guide skills are most valuable. So to your question, Allie, it's really learning how to sit in the space with the client. You don't have to have the answers. You're just going to become an expert at deep listening. You're going to really, we talk about level 3 listening. So you're not listening to reply. You're not listening simply to understand. You're listening for what's not being said. Whole body listening. And when you listen for what's not being said, you're feeling the client as they're sharing with you what's going on in their mind after this divorce or through their retirement. You're starting to kind of connect with them and say, how can I support this person to be the best version of themselves going forward? They need to find some new hobbies, some new friends. They need to figure out, yes, how much they can spend, but what are they going to spend it on? Maybe they need to learn how to spend a little bit more and help them find ways that they can find more joy. So like an example I have is a woman was a client of ours for about 8 years, and she was married and she had 2 daughters and she had a business. Flash forward after about 8 years, she ended up finding out that her husband got sick and he passed very quickly. And both of her daughters went to college about 3,000 miles away. She was in California. They went to the East Coast for school. So now all of a sudden, she didn't have her identity as wife. She was mourning the loss of her husband. Her daughters were a long ways away, and her business was kind of being run by other people at this point. And so I took a walk with her on the beach, and this was, during COVID when that was like a way to be distanced. And I asked her, I said, so you've been through a lot. What brings you joy? What is it that brings you joy? And she goes, what brings me joy? And she said, well, let me think back to what brought me joy before this last year and a half that had been so tumultuous. And she said, what brings me joy is I used to love to get up early and drink my tea and watch the sunrise. And I used to have a gratitude journal. I used to love hosting dinners. I love doing Pilates, and I had a girlfriend I used to do Pilates with. I haven't done it in a while. I even used to like to do dance parties when I get out of the shower. I'd do a little dance party. It's something I did when the girls were young. I used to do little fun family dance parties. So as she was sharing with me these things, I was just kind of listening as we walked on the beach. And then after that beach walk, I went back and I wrote a top 10 happiness list for her. And I made it look really nice, graphically designed, and I put it in a frame and I sent it to her and I said, don't forget your joy list. And, the fact that I listened and I cared and I gave that back to her, yes, we always did a good job with her planning, but that made her a client for life. She's referred us so many large clients. Something as simple as just saying, what brings you joy, right? That's just a very simple question. So I would say that the way younger people can provide more guide skills is simply by deep listening, by empathizing or sympathizing, and being able to help them move in the direction that their heart wants them to go. So it's like listening to the client's heart and helping them move in that direction. So if they say, gosh, I really would like to get healthier, and you use the 12 dimension exercise, they say health is one of the areas where their wheel is bumpy. You say, what would be a big goal that you could think of that would be a sign that you'd improved in health? Well, if I could walk a 5K, that'd be a big goal. You say, great. So let's get you some running shoes. I'm going to put on the financial plan. We're going to get you running shoes, and we're going to, let's find a race that's 6 months out, and I'm going to keep you accountable next quarter when I call you. I want you to have identified a 5K race on the map, sometime in the future, and we'll make that a target. So it starts to be more of a coach relationship instead of just an advisor relationship.
Yeah, and in a world where there's so much noise, everybody's focused about what's going on in their own worlds. It is so special for your advisor to sit down and listen, to let the empty space be there, and for you to just fill it with your needs, your wants, your desires.
It really is. And it's fun too, to be able to learn. We're in such a privileged seat with these clients. They open up and share their hopes, their fears, their dreams, their family lessons, their career successes and failures. And we have this opportunity to just gain all this wisdom from them and to be able to, parrot back wisdom that we've also gained from other clients. So, one of the things that I've talked about is that we've really shifted from being a knowledge economy to a wisdom economy. So it used to be knowledge. When I was young, I had my HP 12C calculator and I'd do a future projection, or I would tell them the rules about a Roth conversion. And that made me feel smart because I had the knowledge. Well, now clients can get knowledge by just picking up their phone and talking to, Chat or Gemini or Claude or whoever they use. And so that's readily available. So we're in the business of delivering wisdom. Yes, you could think about converting your Roth, but let's talk about how that ties into your other priorities that we've discussed. Here's some things I've seen other clients do that seem to really be an impactful planning strategy for them. So how we can provide wisdom is how we're going to be able to provide more value, especially as the advice value stack. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's something I worked with Fidelity to create in 2017. It's a pyramid where we took Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we applied it to our industry. And so the base of the pyramid in Maslow was food, shelter, and clothing. That was like the basic safety mechanism. For us, the basics of what we do is managing the money. And then as you work up the pyramid, that's where you get more and more value. So it's managing money is the lowest value because it's a commodity, right? Someone could go pay 25 basis points to Vanguard to get their money managed. So as you move up, it then becomes more advanced investment management. Maybe you're working around concentrated stocks, or you have an ESG screen you're doing, or maybe it's around a concentrated position, or there's a certain tax layer to it. So that's a little more differentiated, but AI can also do that now. So then it goes into financial planning. So basic financial planning, cash flow management, retirement projections, college projections. But then going above that is more advanced planning. So that's when you get into more estate planning and tax planning and business entity planning. And then above that is when you get into behavioral finance, helping clients to improve their relationship with money, which is more differentiated than advanced planning and is more differentiated than building the portfolios. But at the very top of the pyramid is where you help clients find fulfillment. You help them navigate transitions. You're there for them during these key moments. And in Maslow's pyramid, it was self-actualization. With Fidelity and the advice value stack, we came up with fulfillment as that top category. So our uniquely human skills are more and more needed as we move up that pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, it's not really uniquely human at all. You can punch a button and get most of those answers.
That's going to keep us or separate us from just an AI financial
Yeah,
planner.
exactly. So
Yeah.
again, back to why it's so important to hone your guide skills, your deep listening skills, learning how to be more vulnerable with clients, because part of the way that you get depth with clients, I used to always think, okay, I just need to be a good listener and I'm just going to hold space and let them share. But when the other party is able to share as well, you go deeper together. So I talk about 3 levels of sharing as well. So when you share, the lowest level of sharing is if you just share facts and information. The next level of sharing is when you share stories. Oh, my mom, when she retired, my grandparents, when they did this, you could share stories from your family or from other clients. But the highest level of sharing is when you share your feelings. You know, Joan, I've been seeing you go through this retirement and your divorce the last year. I can't tell you how impressed I am with your courage. I mean, I am been so amazed at your resilience and your courage, seeing you go through all this. I mean, I've been so touched, and I hope that one day I can be the woman you are as far as how, you start to share your feelings with them. Oh my gosh, it gets so much deeper than if you just said, Great, Sharon. Thanks for sharing about your divorce and your retirement. The financial plan says you're going to be just fine to retire next year. So did you want to spend 12,000 a month or 13,000 a month? Like you're missing the window, right? So as advisors, we are in a privileged seat where they are opening up everything to us. Don't waste that opportunity by just staying a mechanic. Get into the guide side of the equation. You'll have make a far bigger difference and you'll have a lot more fun as an advisor.
My name's not even Joan, and I was feeling pretty connected with you. So, channeling your inner younger advisor, you just got the technical side down.
Yeah.
You know how to present a plan. You're starting to feel like I've got some confidence going into it. What would you start doing to become that empathetic listener that can help clients reach that more fulfilling life?
Yeah, I think it depends on if you are in a firm or not. If you're in a firm and have exposure to older advisors, I would start to take an audit. Who amongst them really is exceptional at the guide side of the equation? And how can I start to, shadow them on meetings to see how they go about doing it? So I think, we are the company we keep. So if you surround yourself with people who are really strong in the guide side of the business, then you're going to hone those skills. If you're on your own and wanting to figure this out for yourself, you can talk to chat and have chat be your empathetic guide coach and say, hey, I have this upcoming client, and there's other platforms out there that are providing these services for advisors. They will essentially tee you up to be prepared to say, here's the questions to ask, here's some prompts to ask. So I probably, if I was in the latter camp where I didn't have other people I could shadow, I would probably really try to anticipate what are some questions that I could ask that would support this client in knowing that I care about them as a whole person. So instead of just being prepared by having the portfolio updates and the financial plan updates, I'm going to be prepared by having some deeper question prompts. And because these are my priority, I'm going to carve off time on the agenda to make sure we get to them and not just make it an afterthought. So I would tie it into your planning structure, and I would have conversations teed up, and then I would just simply get ready to practice that level 3 listening, level 3 sharing, and you're going to be surprised at how well it's going to be received. It's technology that's built into our operating system as humans. It's not an update we have to get from Money Guide Pro or eMoney. It's actually in us. We just have the opportunity to kind of unleash it, the latest update of it, by showing up and being available and realizing that your identity, your job is to be someone that can hold that space, even if you're 30 years younger than the client.
You talked about how showing up authentically helped you develop into a better financial advisor, and you wish you had done that at an earlier age.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think it would have impacted your career if you had implemented just being authentically yourself earlier? And is there any other piece of advice you wish you could give your 25-year-old self?
Well, I think it definitely would have impacted me because I would have put less pressure on myself to try to be someone that I don't know that I thought I was. I was someone that, I knew the numbers, I was good at the numbers, and I got the masters and CFP and the things I needed. But my genius was actually my ability to be vulnerable and connect with clients. And by muting that, I was taking away a big part of my resource pool. And so I'm sure I would have found more aligned clients, would have even had more success at bringing on onboarding clients and even connecting with existing clients. I mean, I did have success, but I probably could have had more exponential success, and I would have had more fun doing it instead of trying to play a role on TV, be this buttoned up, serious financial guy, when actually I had a whole other part of me inside that wasn't that way. But I did do it through nonprofit work. So it was interesting. I was always very involved in the community. And I found that my leadership style in my nonprofit roles was a little more playful, was a little more creative, was a little more Seth, esque. And so I did have an outlet for it. And I did get a lot of clients from my nonprofit work. So I think some of those clients allowed me to kind of stay there, even though they're now Mission Wealth clients. That's probably how it would have been different. I would have also not focused on so many different scattered approaches to marketing. So I had like a shotgun approach. I mean, I started a DBA to work inside studios in Hollywood, film studios in Hollywood. I did estate planning. We did long-term care planning and wrote articles on long-term care planning. Already shared with you, we did Roth conversion planning. We did retirement seminar. I mean, I tried everything, right? And had I taken time to connect to really who I was and who my ideal fit clients would be who shared those passions, I would have been able to seek out those really aligned clients instead of just scattering myself, trying everything that was out there, but I didn't know any better. So my advice to my 25-year-old self is like, what is your natural passion? What is your natural affinity interest? And who else shares that with you? And then find a way to have expertise and specialization within that realm. So I'm into personal growth and I love to help people have kind of personal development. I would have started going there much earlier and I would have attracted really amazing clients along the way, which I eventually did later in life, but I could have done it much sooner.
On that point of attracting clients, as a business owner, you also need to attract other advisors that share this similar growth. Money is more than just the numbers side. So how do you attract advisors that have this specific style of financial planning?
You know, when you grow your firm, one of the most important skill sets to have is your ability to attract talent. Because we learn we can only get so far on our own. And we're really blessed to have, 200 plus amazingly talented people at Mission Wealth. And there's a number of us that have been very active at recruiting that talent into the firm. And Allie's a great example of one of them. So being able to know your why you exist, and to have a compelling why attracts others who share that why. So again, if you have a purpose to your firm, to your personal practice, even within another firm, who you work with, why you love working with them, how you want to support those clients you're with, then that's going to be a very compelling recruitment tool to attract like-minded, like-hearted advisors. So I would just say, going back to knowing your authentic self, being able to really connect to that part of you to then attract talent and clients that are aligned is going to make all the difference.
Acting in a hiring capacity, what makes a candidate stand out from the hiring side?
Right. Well, I would say, especially now, it's when they show the ability to have EQ, right? When they show the raw material to have good guide skills. Are they looking me in the eye? Are they willing to be vulnerable and share about themselves when I ask questions about their, upbringing or their, career journey, that they don't just have the buttoned up answer, but they're willing to kind of have humility and share openly. For those that are able to, hold space and hold attention. So give eye contact, how they shake the hand, their ability to think on their feet and be creative. I'm always looking for what are the qualities they're going to need to be an exceptional advisor. And those are the qualities. We can learn the mechanic skills, right? They have to have basic aptitude, but we only hire people that, did well in school and have the degrees. So once we know they have basic aptitude, do they have these EQ skills that are going to allow them to thrive where we really need to be thriving, especially as the AI revolution continues to happen? That's what I'm always looking for. And then the other piece is drive. Like, drive is something you really can't coach someone on. They either have that ambition or not. And I love it when I get to hear someone's stories about how they took this summer job, or they started their own lawn mowing business, or they studied abroad, or they were willing to go to what's unfamiliar. Because if people stay in what's familiar, they're typically not going to find their edges, they're not going to stretch. So when someone has stretched themselves in many different ways, I'm like, that's a person that we want, because we know that they're going to be able to stretch themselves with us, and we're going to learn from them as much as they may learn from us.
How do you cultivate drive? Some people are born with it, and that's great, but others, it's something they have to work on. So how would you go about building up momentum and drive?
I'm a Gen Xer, so it's a different mindset. Like, growing up as a Gen Xer, it was very common that our formula for success was grind. I grew up on a farm, so we baled hay. I had to feed the horses and the pigs and the turkeys. We had to clean stalls. So no pain, no gain was like the family mantra. My dad got my brother and I up every day saying, "Get up, people die in bed." So I just thought that, was it drive, or was it like I didn't want to disappoint my father? It probably was what it was. But then that turned into me understanding that if I could work diligently, I could achieve the outcomes that I wanted in my life. And so when we talk about having a growth mindset, there's two components to a growth mindset. There's the performance zone and the learning zone. The performance zone is when you want to crush a presentation and not make any mistakes. That's the performance zone. The learning zone is when you actually want to make mistakes. You want to find your edges. You want to innovate. You want to fail, but fail forwards. Carving off time for the learning zone will allow you to be better at the performing zone. So when it comes back to drive, I would say the drive shouldn't just be about looking good or, the performance zone type of activities of landing the client. The drive should be, how can I be the best version of myself in this career that I've chosen? How can I show up fully, not to please the boss, not to please your parents, but to feel good when you look yourself in the mirror? And for me, I've tried to kind of change the definition. So there's a great conductor called Benjamin Zander, was a conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Symphony. And he said, as leaders, our job is to make other people's eyes shine. And we're all leaders, right? Even if it's us with a client, us with our family, us with friends. So if you're with someone, say a coworker or a client or a prospective client, and you're not making their eyes shine, you're not doing your work in the world. So I try to say, how can I wake up and be a vehicle of inspiration to help make other people's eyes shine? That was my job. That was my drive. How can I uplift others to bring out the best in them? That was my why. And as I started to do that, there's kind of this contagious energy. It starts to attract like-minded, like-hearted people. It starts to feel like, gosh, what an amazing job I have to try to help make people's eyes shine. Whether I'm recruiting someone, meeting a prospective client, meeting with a client, how can I make them walk taller, feel better from the brief or long interaction that they have with me? So that's how I find it, is by trying to say, how can I really show up and be of service to that person, to that moment? The more we give, the more we get. So I've been able to get a lot because I was always focused on giving.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time to us today. Is there anything else that you would like to close with, or any information you'd like to make sure that you share now?
I'd love to invite anyone to take a look at my TED Talk and realize that I did that in 2016. And you'll see, the belief set of how wealth is about so much more than money. So they can take a look at that on YouTube. And always just encourage you to keep being the fullest expression of you. My invitation is, don't play small. Imagine yourself being 10 times braver, 10 times bolder than you were yesterday. What would that look like? How would that feel? That's the opportunity we have to go make a huge difference out there in this amazing industry.
That has been the Blueprint in FPA NexGen Podcast. See you next time.